Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Five Questions with the Paulist. I'm Mike Hayes, and today we're going to go to the great city of Bethesda, Maryland. And Deacon Mark Asselin has joined us. He is one of the Paulist Deacon affiliates. Hey, Deacon Mark, how are you?
Hey, Mike, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And let's get right into it. Question one: how did you first come across the Paulist? It seems like you've crossed paths a number of times.
Yeah, I've had three starts with the Paulist, if you will. When I graduated from college, I entered the Jesuits and didn't really know the Paulist at the time. I was interested in film, so I really could have gone that direction. But it went into the Jesuits, and they had encouraged us in novitiate on Sundays to go out into the community and explore masses in different parts of Boston, which is where I was. And along with some of the other novices, ended up at the Paulist Center one time. And eventually that became kind of our Sunday home. So that was my first time in encountering the Paulists. Then after having discerned out of the Jesuits after a few years, I had moved to Boulder, Colorado, and the Paulist ran the campus ministry then at St. Thomas Aquinas Parish, right next to the campus. And there, my fiance and I went to Mass, and my fiance was also becoming a Catholic. So she had instruction there at that parish, and eventually we were married by Father Mike Martin,
Yeah,
tallest
the
Paulist.
tallest Paulist, yes. He's been on this program as well. We can check that out.
Yeah. I guess he's down in Florida now.
Mhm.
But he married us. We had actually been married. Were married in a different church building because unfortunately the parish had been hit by arson. That was a tough time for the community. But we had Father John Kenny, who's since passed away, and Father Terry Ryan, who was
Yeah.
there. So it was a great parish. And then many years later, after graduate school, we eventually moved to the DC area. And in our parish, we had a Paulist priest, Father Frank DiCiano, who was there on weekends. And we really liked Father Frank. And then again, moving into the future, I had heard about this thing called the Paulist Deacon affiliates and looked up to see who ran the Deacon affiliates, and it was Father Frank. So it seems like it was all intended to be this way.
All
It
roads
was a
lead to Brother
message.
Frank, he hired me at Bethesda when I started out when he was president, so I'm indebted to him as well. Hey, question number two: if a person in your parish came to you and said, "Hey, Deacon Mark, I think I've had enough. I think I'm done with the church. I'm just going to stay home on Sundays and eat a cinnamon roll and grab some coffee," what would you say to that person?
Yeah. No, it's not really a hypothetical question, is it? Since COVID, we've certainly seen a decline in attendance in our parish. We're probably back up to about 70% of where we were before, and it seems to have leveled off at that, right? So a lot of people have clearly decided not to come back for various reasons. And so I think anybody who would actually come up and ask me that question probably is looking for a reason to stay, actually. So that's easier. A lot of the people just aren't coming back and aren't asking the question to begin with. So I would say the first thing, that I've always loved that the first word in the rule of St. Benedict is listen. And I think that's really what we need to do first, is to listen and to find out, where that individual is in his or her faith life, where she or he is in terms of the church. And I think there are probably a number of people who've not come back to church, in part because they weren't particularly committed before. They were coming to Mass out of habit, and COVID kind of broke the habit. And we just may not see those people again unless they have to come back for the sacraments. But then there are the people that you were alluding to who are dissatisfied or angry with the church, maybe because of the clerical sex abuse scandal, or maybe because of an issue where the church takes a stand that they find it difficult to agree with that particular stance. And there, I think it's really a matter of being with that person and really taking the time, again, to listen, find out where they are, and to provide a welcoming kind of approach to them that, hey, you know, we all have challenges in our lives. The issues that they deal with are serious issues, and we take them seriously. We don't shrug them off. But because we are all kind of in a position where we have these various challenges, that the church can be a welcoming place for them, and that ultimately it's the idea that we're a community and we support each other wherever we are, that we're welcoming of wherever they are in their faith life, wherever they are with respect to the church, but the love of Christ brings us together. And in that community, we experience God's mercy, and we, in that mercy, I think, feel like the leper did in the reading about the 10 lepers, who comes back and thanks Jesus for having cured him, that we can find a sense of gratitude and even joy in the gospel. And so it's that community that really is the draw card, I think, to come back despite where we might be with a particular issue, that we have one another in Christ.
Yeah, awesome. And so question 3, you are an interesting guy. I follow you on Twitter, and there's all these Chinese characters in your Twitter handles description there. And so you're an expert in classical Chinese literature. What's one way that your knowledge of Chinese literature has helped you as a deacon?
Yeah, I'm not so active in the field now, so I don't know that I would call myself still an expert, but I certainly spent a good part of my life studying Chinese culture, and in particular, early Chinese literature. And if I could, I'd like to actually step back a little bit for a moment and sort of just give a quick anecdote of how I even got to study Chinese. I had, when I was in the novitiate, I had had an experience where I was teaching refugee kids in a bilingual school. Bilingual education was very popular back in the early 80s. And I was assigned the kids who were the most disruptive in class. So it was no small task to take on these kids. And I had one Chinese kid who I spent half of my time just chasing him down the school, trying to figure out where he was, because he would be released from his class and he wouldn't show up. And I really wasn't sure how to deal with this particular kid. We wasted so much time. And then one day I just thought, you know, we're not getting anywhere with English. I'm just going to ask him to teach me some Chinese. And that completely transformed the relationship.
Wow.
Once he started teaching me, he suddenly got a little bit more interested and more receptive to hearing something about English. But in the course of doing that, I actually really enjoyed his teaching me Chinese and the Chinese language. So I had, after that experience, had thought about the Chinese mission as a potential future direction. But then after leaving the Jesuits, went into formal studies of first Chinese art, and then, because art is so closely tied to literature. And, you know, I think, first of all, studying another culture, no matter what it is, makes you a better human being. Just being able to deep dive into the way that other people look at life, how they think, how they express themselves in art and literature and various means. That just makes you a better person. And I hope that other people would say that of me. In particular, as a deacon, I would say that one of the things I picked up in studying Chinese literature and Chinese philosophy is one particular significant idea, and I don't want to overdo it, but in the West, we focus a lot, our philosophy focuses a lot on being. And in Chinese culture, the Chinese philosophy starts with the premise of doing. And there isn't, in fact, even a word that has the same meaning in classical Chinese as our word for being. And so everything has to do with doing. Confucius has some saying that a king should do like a king. What does that mean? It means that, you have some idea of what a king ought to be. And if a king isn't doing that, what a king ought to be, then the king isn't being a king at all. Similarly, I think a deacon is someone who should serve. And so if a deacon isn't acting like a deacon, one who gives his life to service in the Lord in imitation of Jesus, then we aren't really being deacons. So I think that's something that I've taken with me. Being a deacon is also important. So I don't think it's a matter of what is better than the other, but it also reminds me that my life as a deacon ought to be a life of service. And it's a good check for me when I start to become more self-centered or forget who I really am.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great story. I'm going to steal that for a reflection one day. Question 4. Here's an easy one. What's a comfort food for you?
So, I think food is a comfort food for me.
Yes,
Which is a danger as I get older. As is bourbon. Bourbon would be a comfort drink, I guess. But I grew up in a French Canadian family in New England, down on what we jokingly called the French Canadian Riviera of southern Maine. And our family got by on my dad's teaching salary. And so we had certain foods that we had each week on a particular night. And every Friday night, it was crepes. And it was just simple, it's essentially having pancake night, except being French, we had crepes instead with pancake syrup. And that is something that now my family continues in that tradition, although we tend to load it with cheese and fruits of different kind. And since in my later life, I grew up in Vermont, maple syrup and not pancake syrup. So we've kicked it up a notch, but definitely crepes are my comfort food.
You guys are obsessed about maple syrup. Everybody I know from Vermont carries it in their backpacks and everything else. Come on, guys.
Yeah, I hate to show you my closet. Yeah, the pantry.
And question 5, you're on a desert island, and we've given you the scriptures already, but what's one other book that you have to have with you?
Well, I'm glad we have the scriptures. That's great. So starting point. This is going to sound a little pretentious, but my favorite book is actually Moby Dick.
Wow.
It's such a great book with so many different genres built into one. And it's a sea story. I mean, if you're going to be on a desert island, you might as well read a famous sea story. And it's long. So hopefully by the time I had reread it, we would have been rescued. So I guess Moby Dick is going to be my answer.
There you go. You'd certainly have the time, right?
That's right.
So those are 5 questions. Deacon Mark, it's been a lot of fun. Thanks so much for joining us. And I hope that the Deacon Affiliate Program continues to feed you in many ways, and that you continue to feed the program as well with your generosity. Thanks, Mike. This has been a lot of fun. And if there are any deacons out there who might be who are also attracted to the Paulist mission and apostolate, please check us out.
I think that you'd find it interesting. So
Absolutely.
thanks, Mike.
Yeah, no problem. So this has been 5 questions. I'm Mike Hayes. He's Deacon Mark Asselin, and we'll see you all again soon.